Okay. Hi, everybody. I don't see the Discord thread at the same time, so I'm going to assume that if you have any questions or whatever, you'll have to ask them verbally or ask somebody to ask them. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Bill Degnan, and I am I guess you call me the chief curator of the Kennett Classic Computing Museum and Gift Shop. And this talk is about how to run essentially an independent or an indie museum relating to computers, and related to that, a talk specific to Commodore and Commodore information is kind of mixed in with it, just because that's the group we're talking to today. Here's a view from the front door. It's we are located in a residential commercial small town off of Route 1, which is the route that goes from Maine down to Florida, but it's a nice quiet block, but there's a lot of restaurant traffic and so on where we're located. And so that takes me to the first point. What I did was I broke this talk into discussion points. And the first discussion point about running an independent computer museum is picking a location. So the idea here is the world is not necessarily knowledgeable or interested in computer museums. So by putting a computer museum in the middle of a restaurant, small town, commercial area, people will just kind of wander in and see what this is all about. And in doing so, introduces the world to the world of computing and computing history. Here's a view from the entrance room, the first room of 5 rooms that we have. This picture was taken in the past month, and you can see that we have a lot of displays and computer artifacts. And in this particular picture shows a lot of things from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And here's a view of the small gift shop area that we have set up, and you can see various types of computer history themed items for sale. The Kennett Classic is not a store. It has a very small gift shop relative to the rest of the exhibits, and the store itself is kept in one spot. So what you're looking at is the only place where there's actually things that are for sale. You can see books, you can see some mugs, you can see a Commodore chicken head hot sauce, and so on. Okay. Again, if anybody, I don't know if anyone wants to chime in, feel free to speak up. If you want to say something, please feel free. I don't know if there's a way to confirm I'm being heard. Is there anyone else on the
You are being heard fine.
Okay, good. Okay. Point number 2 is having a successful independent computer museum it's not going to be a profitable venture. So you have to get nonprofit status, and it takes a little while. We finally have earned 501c status, which in America is the status from the IRS that enables you to do fundraising. But before we actually got the status, we had to do a lot of paperwork and work with my accountant and hire a lawyer temporarily to set things up. And they advise you to act as if you're operating as if you're a nonprofit right from the beginning, including having a guest registry, recording your donations, and basically start keeping a separate books. Run it like a business, but run it like a nonprofit business. And it doesn't hurt to read a book or go online and read up about what that involves for the location that you are. Here's a picture of our guest registry computer. This is the newest computer in our museum, and it's a Silicon Graphics Octane. And as you can see, it's got a picture of the actual guest registry. Here's another. This is a Next computer. It's also serving as a guest registry. This is a computer web page as if it was 1995. And the idea here is we tied the guest registry in with a sort of a journey through the museum to see what kinds of things had to happen to finally get to the point that you had a computer capable of connecting to the internet. When people first walk into the museum and they see a Next or a Silicon Graphics computer, they remark about how old it is and how primitive it is. and how old the web pages look and so on. But by the time they get to the end of the museum, again, they realize how many things have to go into making a NeXT computer or a Silicon Graphics computer. So it's got two purposes. But we use the guest registry to help record officially the number of visits we have, should we be audited, or somebody want to confirm that, yes, we are indeed providing a service to the community. Okay, next point, knowing your strengths and playing upon them. This is a view of our many library shelves. One of our biggest strengths is that we really work hard to maintain a good quality computer themed library with a lot of very on target, very on topic magazines and books about computing. And we have also a lot of, here's an example that you might find, maybe some of you remember this newsletter. We save a lot of newsletters that are related to different industries. Here's another one, the CBug library directory about the B series Commodore computers. So I like to foster a collection of actual paper documentation and to keep it nice and have it available to the public. And so what we do is we make it so that one of our strengths is making this information available either remotely, scanning things, or having people actually be able to come in and do research. From that, we have a lot of great art that we can pull from the documentation we have. We've got materials from the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. And we also, it's not just a library, of course, we also do have actual computing artifacts. Unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, there really are no 50s computers lying around that you can just put into a museum. So you have to look for those things that are related to computers or pieces of computers, such as this core memory here from I'm not sure exactly what year it's from, but this is the kind of core you would have seen in the 50s and early 60s. We have a lot of newspapers. Computer World was a great newspaper from the 60s that we have a reasonably good collection of. And of course, we do have some wonderful computer hardware. Here's a picture of a data point 3300 that a volunteer at the museum actually got up and running, repaired the keyboard and the power supplies and everything. And then we put a Wi-Fi modem on the back of it so it actually connects to the internet. Here's another example. People's Computer Company is a San Francisco newspaper in the early 70s. And the Gametronics and the computer, the first West Coast Computer Fair and so forth. Now, Gametronics is interesting because in this proceedings was a article from, this is January 18th of 1977, showing what's his name? Chuck Peddle demonstrating a Commodore PET. Now we're talking about January 18th, 1977. So one of the great things about having a library is you can, and you're a person like me and others who love to read and do research, you can find things like this. This isn't any particular computer history magazine, but it is interesting that this is an earlier visual of the PET than the Apple or the TRS-80 Model 1. So some could argue that the PET came first, although I'm sure the Apple people and the Tandy people might disagree. Here's some more clippings taken from some of the newspapers and magazines that we have on site. The Commodore PET, this is October of 1977, Byte magazine, I believe, on the left, and that would be because you don't just put a magazine out, there's many months, the picture was probably taken earlier in the summer. And so again, it just shows that there was a functional PET in the summer of 1977. Here's on the left, you can see the Commodore service manual. These were given to repair centers around 1979, 80, 81 by Commodore to make it easier for repair centers to support the Commodore computers. I have a lot of these kind of things, the service bulletins and service manuals that came out. And one of the things I'm interested in doing as far as TPUG goes is maybe collaborating and seeing what's missing from your library. And I'd like to learn more about the kinds of things that you have there, and or if you've got a museum, what kind of items that you're showing as well. Here's a picture of a B series computer with the fast bus. It gives you the ability to connect to like a 1571 drive, and this was sold for the B series. Here's an example of a Commodore a 25680 that's booting up MS-DOS 1.25. And so we have a lot of really neat, interesting things at the museum that you can fire up if you came to visit us in Kennett Square, Pennsylvania, which I know is not very close to Toronto, but it's right down 95 on your way to Florida. But this is an example of the kind of things that we have here that really aren't necessarily valuable or famous, but I think they're really neat that Commodore made a coprocessor board with a 8088 processor that and Microsoft sent them a copy of DOS, and somebody in the Commodore labs actually got it running. And it's kind of neat to imagine what it would have been like if Commodore had gone a different way with the B series computers. We've also received a library of the Connecticut microcomputer pet software library. We have that on file here with the cassette tapes, and other types of magazine articles from, not necessarily from mainstream computer magazines. So I'm just showing you some pictures. This was one of those experiments that we did where we used the user port to make it so that if you type in one keyboard, it shows up on the other screen and vice versa. This was to experiment in writing games that use the ability to connect a bunch of pets together. Here's some more pictures from the magazines and things that we have on file. This is one of the first sequencer synthesizers on the left, the Muse by Triadex. Here's a terminal that from a local person in our area, which we try to feature if possible, things from the Mid-Atlantic, Philadelphia, Delaware, Maryland area. On the left, the AlphaCom. This is from the late 60s, early 70s. It looks awfully like a PC from 5 or 6 years later. It had core memory, and it had the ability to connect and do form processing remotely by just hooking it up to a power source and connecting it like it was a teletype. Okay, I don't know if there's any questions, so I'm just going to keep going. The next point to make about having an independent computer museum is to remember that not everybody who comes to a computer museum knows anything about computers or computer history, but they do know about stories, and they do know how to connect to where the computer fit into their lives. So it's important that if you're going to be putting together a presentation for the general public, that you remember that you're not probably you watching this right now, even as a Commodore aficionado, aren't necessarily the general public. And although it's important to have an independent computer museum that or an independent museum of any kind that caters to all types of people, you want to remember that not everybody is like you if you consider yourself to be an expert. So as a result, what we try to do is pair, especially when we don't have the complete computers, but like in the 50s and the 60s, we try to pair artifacts with stories. Here's an example where this is the Jolt, which is this first 6502 based computer. The 6502 obviously later went on to be in the PET and the Apple II and the Atari line of computers and so on. But we found an article from the library. So playing on our strengths and putting a story behind it, we can talk not just about the fact that it's the first 6502 computer, but we can talk about how it was used to teach children how to do computing. And also next to that, not shown here, but we also have an Atari 2600, because the Jolt was used as the prototype to make Combat, which was what was taken to the venture capitalists to build the first Atari 2600. So this computer is historically important not necessarily because people know about it, because of the things that it led to. And by telling those stories, most people can identify with an Atari 2600, or they can identify with teaching children how to use a computer. Some of you might recognize Commodore logo. Before Commodore got started selling computers, they were making office supplies and cash registers and so on. Now we are Commodore land here in Kennett Square area. We're very near Westchester, Pennsylvania, right down the road. So you're going to see a higher percentage of Commodore artifacts, I call them, than you would normally see, in your average town across the United States or Canada. And if, for example, somebody came in and said, "Hey, would you like this?" It says Commodore on it. And so we're using it to store papers and documents. But it also reminds us, and it makes it easier for us when we're giving a tour, to show how Commodore evolved from a company that didn't make computers into one that did. We also have people who stop by. Now, this CIT 101 terminal might not be interesting to a Commodore person until you realize that it was actually in Commodore, and it was the terminal that was being used, and it was the vendor that Commodore used to actually do their work when they connected to a mainframe computer or whatever it is they were connecting to, and that was their service tags that they put on the back of things. Here's another one from somebody else. This is a Hayes modem. And this came from a Commodore engineer's wife who dropped off his bench Amiga 1000 computer that he used to do development and actually create the advancements in Amiga technology. And another thing that she brought was an interesting development version of the Commodore 64 motherboard that, if you study it, and I've been told, because I'm not an engineer, that there's duplications on this board. It was almost used to kind of bridge the gap between the C version and the original breadbox version of the Commodore 64. And this was just brought in, donated by just a local person, basically, whose husband happened to have worked at Commodore, and he just saved it. So if you look at the engineering, you can see the old and the new that you could turn on and off to verify that the new function works along with the original function, and making sure that the new version of the Commodore 64 worked. And so I guess that's part of the way that they did it back then. Here's some pictures of some people who just stopped by. One gentleman stopped by to donate a Commodore 4000, and got some another couple who came in to just from the gift shop. We have Commodore mouse pads, and we also have a free pile, and we give away a lot of stuff. So they were taking some of the free stuff that we happen to have available. We get a lot of donations, but the rule is for everything that comes in, something has to go out. So as a result, if you're on our mailing list and you're nearby, we make announcements as to when things become available, and you can swing by and pick them up. Here's another example. We work with people who are disabled. Sometimes there was a family that came in, and they had a child who, for whatever reason, was very interested in the Commodore computing, and so we did a special tutorial session on getting it up and running. And so it's nice to have stories behind the computers, not just showing a bunch of things that were purchased on eBay. Okay, so let's say you wanted to start a computer museum, and you wanted to know how to get started. The first step is to think in your mind about not necessarily opening, mortgaging our home and buying everything you can find on a particular subject on eBay and then saying, "Here, look at my museum." But start thinking about making exhibits, one exhibit at a time, and saving that exhibit one exhibit at a time, so that you don't reuse the same items from one exhibit to another. So in other words, you say, "Here's my exhibit about this, and here's my exhibit about that." And one of the best places you can do something like that is at a World of Commodore or a Vintage Computer Festival. There's one in the East, there's the Midwest, and they're all over the world now. Here's an example. In 2005, I did an example on the B series Commodore computers. This was a Vintage Computer Festival East 3.0. This was the first one held in Wall, New Jersey. And this exhibit was saved, and eventually it showed up again in our in the Kennett Classic Museum. So these items were put together in a thoughtful way to tell the story of the B series Commodore computer, which personally I find very interesting. I think because it's an alternative history of what could have happened. And I always liked, I thought they were just kind of beautiful machines, and it was something to dive into as a personal interest. Here's another example. This is an analog computer, a Heathkit EC1. This was exhibited at a different vintage computer festival. And this is nice because it actually shows the falling body problem outputted to the oscilloscope. Here's another example. These items and some of these items were taken to the, I used to call them suitcase exhibits because I would take as much as I could fit in my luggage, and I would fly to the Vintage Computer Festival Midwest, and then I would put these out as exhibits, just simple plug boards and tube modules from vintage computers from the 50s. And those were then eventually saved, and then those were actually found their way on the shelves at in our industrial computing room in Kennett Classic. Here's another example. This is there's a one of the things that we talk about is the difference between the Motorola 68,000 and the Intel 8088 computer designs, and how IBM went one direction, and then ultimately the Macintosh and the Amiga used the 68,000 and the pluses and minuses of either. And so this is just a view of one of the shelves as you're walking through the museum. The Sage is the 68,000 computer that probably no one's heard of before, and it was a failure in the market because they didn't take advantage of the graphic capability that the 68,000 had an advantage over compared to the 8088. Okay, again, I can't hear if anyone has any questions, and I don't see the Discord, so I'm just going to keep moving forward, so save your questions to the end. The next major point is to have a clearly defined scope that any average person can understand. This is a recurring theme that I'm definitely trying to put forward, that a museum needs to take the strengths that you have as a presenter, as a curator, as a historian, and then develop a scope and focus on those things specifically. So again, when a person walks in, they clearly understand, what is this a museum about? This is not a museum of the junk I have. This is a museum about specific themed items. Here's just a funny, we have a just a funny little greeting card that we sell, but that's kind of the idea here, is that one of the funny things that happens to us, because we're located in an area with a lot of boutiques and museums and whatnot. Sometimes couples will be walking along and they'll see the sign to the computer museum, and one or the other of them will go, "Oh, I'm going to go check that out really quick," and the other one will continue shopping. And so a lot of the times you get one half of a couple, because they're the ones that want to see the computers, where the other one has no interest in them at all. But it definitely sometimes people will walk in, they'll look around, and then they just immediately turn around again. It's funny. Here's a view of some of the books. We have a lot of books, many bookcases. You can see some of them behind me. And again, very targeted and very specific to computing and computing technology, not just a bunch of useless manuals and things that don't pertain to the business. Here's just a scan of an article from a Popular Electronics. Here's a picture of a plug board display. We were talking about the punch cards, and this part of the tour where we talk about how before there were electronic computers, there were things that were computing devices, such as mechanical adding machines, and there were, of course, punch card readers. And this plug board shows how you could delimit a card reader so that you could delimit like first name, last name, and the address information, and so on. So this is just a visuals. We don't actually have the IBM 29. We'd love to have one, but we can talk and tell the story, and we can show examples of those kinds of things that we're used within the computers. Here's some Commodore specific items. Does anyone ever see the Commodore 1-watt transceiver walkie-talkie? Probably not, but just so you know, this is not a Commodore branded device, but it is a Commodore on the name, and so it's fun to just have these kinds of things around. Again, Commodore adding machines before computers was their business. Here's some just more photography. This is this is a large print that we have on the wall. Here's some more photography of the Commodore Super Pet. Here's a Commodore model 8096. This was found in a local thrift shop, and you don't really see the 8096 very often. A lot of people upgraded the 64K, but actually to see the branded version, that was in part because of the fact that we're in Commodore land, and so you're going to see a lot of the last things sold by Commodore are going to still be in this area. Here's a view of the 8-bit room. You see lots of computers. You see Commodore, you see Apple, you see Atari, you see in the back, you see the Altairs and the other kinds of things. People who come to a museum like this, they want to see, there are certain kinds of computers they're going to want to see. They're going to want to see a Commodore 64. They're going to want to see an Altair. They're going to want to see an Apple II. They're going to see the computers that they used when they were doing computing. So if you show too many rare and esoteric computers, then people won't be able to connect with your museum as well. And the average viewer, the average visitor isn't going to understand what this is all about. Here's some more scans, photography from this. This is from the 16-bit room. Here's some newer computers. So you can see the PS2, some VMS machines, some Sun, and so on. So you wanted to create a computer museum, and you know that you've been banking exhibits. It could take, in my case, 20 years to prepare for this. So it's really important that you also have an inventory system, and you've got storage of your inventory that's going to be there for the long haul. So you really need to have a plan as far as how am I going to document what I've got and how the exhibits are going to be put together. And if somebody wants to collaborate with me or your team of people on something, that you'll be able to retrieve it, and that you won't come back to it 10 years from now and find that it's not in operational condition. Many of you know buying something from somebody on eBay and they said it worked when I put it in storage in 1983. And you know what that means. It almost certainly is the rifle cap is going to go up, and it's not going to be working. So it's very important you have an inventory system, not only what you have, but you have some sort of record of the last time it was powered on and what the circumstances are with the computer. And in my case, I use vintagecomputer.net, which is my blog website that records the activities of a computer, and I can reference the last time I used a computer using that website, and notes and databases and so on. It seems like a lot of work, so it's important that you gear your scope to what you can handle and what you have time to do. Some more pictures. Here's some B-series cards, some user card hardware, some core memory, and some other things from the mid-60s. One of the other inventory-oriented things is archiving disks. Disks don't last forever, so we have a station set up to record, to make copies of disks or make disks available to other people. We have a lot of people who come into Kennett Classic and they'll have an 8-inch disc, or they'll have a paper tape, or they'll have a 5 1/4-inch disc that they did their dissertation, or they had a game and they want to put it onto a thumb drive to use on an emulator. So we have a facility set up for that, and you can see this is image disk running, copying an 8-inch disc. Some more examples of the documentation we have on file, some more. And even more. You can see there is a lot in Kennett Classics Library. Okay, so you've got an inventory system. You know who's going to be walking in the door. You know you know where you have and what you have, and you have somewhat of a plan. The next thing you need to know is your audience. Now, I'm talking to Commodore people in general, although I'm sure many of you are like me, love Commodore, but also love other types of computers. But you need to know your audience. And in the case of a museum, if it's going to be a Commodore museum, then you know your audience is going to be Commodore people. But if it's a general purpose history museum, then you need to make sure that you're not necessarily favoring any one manufacturer or computer type, including gaming systems, business systems, scientific systems, and so on. But because this is a Commodore presentation, I don't know if you've noticed, but I've tried to find as many interesting Commodore images as I can. Here's a good example. This wouldn't necessarily be interesting to everybody, but those of you who are Commodore fans like I am, you would see how neat it is to see this kind of a cover, I guess, to a software package. I think this was like the inside cover to a 3-ring binder for Word Pro 4 Plus with a model working on her Commodore PET. Here's some more interesting things to a Commodore person. I've seen this Jim Butterfield picture floating around on the internet, but it's nice to have a copy, actually out of the magazine. And also, of course, you're going to read microcomputing and kilobaud and so on, because they have plenty of Commodore-oriented themed articles. This one I always thought was funny. This is an error. You can see the Commodore B128. Obviously, this is not the B128. It is the C128. So somewhere along the line, signals got crossed, and it's fun to find these kinds of articles as well. And you can see in the last sentence how Westchester, Pennsylvania, which is really only a few minutes down the road from us, is where the headquarters was. Another picture. This is from a punch card controller. This is from this is called a cord module from a control data computer from the mid-60s. Another know your audience example that I love to use is this PDP 1105. This has a working teletype, and people love the sounds and the percussiveness of a teletype printing out a program output. And similarly, if you were running a Commodore museum or an 8-bit museum or a game museum, obviously games have music and the sounds that come out of the games. But don't forget printers, the sound of printers, the sound of modems. Sound is a big factor in a museum as well. These are some of the favorite must-have type things that you should have in it. Many people would expect to see. I hate to think of it that way, but you can see. Computer museums should have some. You should consider the fact whether you have something that enough people would want to see. Recently we got a donation of a PDP-8. We drove all the way from Chicago to pick this one up. This is definitely something that people would want to see. We have, from a Commodore standpoint, we used to, when we first opened the museum, we had a just Commodore display, but we still have a number of the items still up, a Commodore B520, a P500, and so on. So we're definitely not forgetting, that we have a lot of people who worked at Commodore and who were affiliated with Commodore in one way or the other, or just used Commodore computers. Tend a little bit higher percentage of those come to the museum, but IBM is located in the area, Burroughs, Franklin. There's a lot of other companies as well, so we can't forget them. Another photograph. This is some Suns with a Sun laptop and some Next computers. So this is newer stuff. The reason that I have this slide is to remind me that when we first opened the museum, we featured the 8-bit computers because that's what a lot of people in our generation think of when they think of vintage computers. But what I learned really quickly was when a high school student walks in the door, they don't understand or never heard of a Commodore 64. They don't really know what an Apple II is. So it's very important, we found, to include newer things, all the way up to 1997, things that have a graphical user interface, things that connect to the internet, or at least show something graphically. So there's a room in the museum dedicated to those items from the 386 class up and into the various types of workstations. So knowing your audience is important. Here's some mini computers, and for the VAX world, which personally I'm a big fan. I'm a big DEC fan as well. The next point in the talk is you have one shot to impress people. This was an important a lesson that I also learned when the museum was set up, because you have a random audience at first. Nobody knows you're there. You have a random audience of people who happen to be walking down the street on their way to a restaurant or on their way to a shop or whatever. We have a bookstore next door, and so on. People will walk into your museum, they'll look around, and you'll hear them mumble to their significant other, or their son or their daughter or whatever. They'll say, wow, Uncle Murray would love this place. So in other words, there's a 1 degree separation from your true audience at a computer museum. So it's important that you have a nice, friendly museum to invite anybody to come in, who will then recognize who they need in their family to tell, hey, you need to go check this place out. So 3 years in, we're getting more and more people who are making the journey to the museum specifically because they know the museum's there, and then they might go out to dinner. Whereas in the other way around, they go out to dinner and then they discover the museum. And those people are great because they set the time aside to really get into and work on things. And also, we have a great local community of people now who stop by and do nothing but work on computers. They bring them and we work together, especially on Saturdays. We have people working right now downstairs. Hey, Joe, who are working on computers because it's just a fun thing to do. So we've built a little community of people and run our own workshops here on repairing computers. And those people usually found out about the museum 1 degree of separation away. So here's some just nice display examples. Some scans of some more of the materials that we have on site. This is one of my favorites. This is from the Linking Ring magazine. This is an article about how far away does a person have to be to recognize an item if it's pixelated. It's one of the first times that this was a topic of discussion on in a magazine of general purpose. And in this case, this is a magazine of magicians. So the magicians were talking about using computers in their magic. Here's another example of an advertisement that shows the comparison between the PET, the Apple, and the TRS-80 with the chess software. Here's a brochure for an early or mid-60s UNIVAC computer. Okay, and the next important thing to running an indie computer museum or any museum is go to other museums and get ideas for exhibits and layout, and then of course, how do they run a gift shop? Now, why am I even mentioning a gift shop? Gift shop is good because sometimes people walk in, and I should give credit to Karen, my partner in the formation of the co-founder of this museum. She said you have to have a gift shop because it makes people walk in. It also encourages people to just kind of browse a little bit, because off the street, they see a gift shop, they at least walk in. It gives you a little bit of time to hand them a brochure to give to their Uncle Murray or whoever it is that's interested in vintage computers. And you don't make a lot of money from it, but it makes it look like it's a real museum. So if you get examples, don't just get examples of how people do layouts and exhibits, just at least ask yourself, if I'm going to run a museum, do I want to include a gift shop? And if so, what do I want to sell? So this is a view of Burroughs' B17 front panel. And what I did was I attached it to a table. And so this is basically the table for the gift shop, and it just makes a computer theme, a more artistic theme, because part of what we wanted to do is didn't want to just present computer history for what it is. Let's see the time here. How are we doing? Okay, 15 more minutes. I'm just going to wrap this up pretty quickly, but you want to make things look good. You want to find the pictures that are colorful and artistic, and you want to make sure that that you have these things on the walls in nice places, so you have colors, and so people see them and they want to be there. Computers can often be boring beige boxes, so you have to find ways of spicing it up. Speaking of spices, we also have our own branded chicken head hot sauce. This is a real legitimate hot sauce, and because the company that sponsors our museum is a web design firm, we have internal design, and so we created our own logo for playing off the chicken head logo. And it's funny, we didn't realize when we made this logo that it looked like Commodore because we were just making a chicken head, right? But this is a personal favorite of mine, hot sauces, and so we sell these in the gift shop. And here's a picture of Mike Tomzak, who stopped by. He was a guest speaker and presenter last year at our Kennett Classic 2.0 event that we have. We have an event once a year, and there he is posing with the hot sauce before we kind of got the event rolling. And kind of continuing on the theme I've already been talking about displays should be clean. They should be clean and safe for both artifacts and visitors. This plays on to the earlier point I had about the good inventory and safety for your inventory, and you're a steward of these computers, these things and these artifacts and these papers or whatever it is you have. If the purpose of your endeavor is to preservation and restoration of computing history, you've got to take that responsibility. You want to just hold these things hostage until they slowly deteriorate, but you should be thinking about the fact that these things should be in as good condition or better than they were when they were rescued, when somebody donated them. Similarly, when people walk in the door, it shouldn't smell moldy. It should be clean. The floors should be clean, and they should also be safe. People should be able to get up and down the stairs. There should be handrails and so on, because you're trying to make a public visiting location that's wheelchair friendly if possible, and so on. Lastly, don't leave machines running and unattended for too long. We absolutely have a policy of that. Not only that, we have fire extinguishers in every room because as we all know, vintage computers do go up. And even though usually it's the RIFA cap and it's not dangerous, you really definitely have to be prepared for anything. So I think it's important that you be responsible and you take this seriously. Here's an example, just an example of some more from the exhibits, some more 8-bit stuff. Continuing on about the pleasant environment. And again, the idea here is that you don't know who's going to walk in the door. So you want to make sure that anybody can come in and that they're going to recommend this place to somebody. And the perspective of a person who isn't really as interested in computing history is going to be, is this neat? Is this colorful? Is this a place that I would want to bring my family? Here's another view of the gift shop. We have mouse pads. And this is just not as good of a picture of the 16-bit room. You can see the video game system in the background there. And then I think this is lastly, or almost lastly, know when to get help. You might know computer history, but that does not mean that you know how to make an exhibit or give tours or make displays. So if you're going to create a museum, make sure that you, like I did by working with Karen and other volunteers in the area, to play on your strengths. I know a lot about computer history. I used to teach computer history at the University of Delaware for 4 semesters. I was involved in the co-founding of the Vintage Computer, Middle Atlantic Retro Computing Hobbyists, and the creation of that museum with Evan Koblenz. Layout of a gift shop and just generally speaking, what the flooring should be and the display shelving and so on. Those were things I didn't necessarily know about. And of course, I went to every museum in the area and every computer museum I could find so I could see what they were doing there, what I liked, what I didn't like, so I could work with Karen to come up with a plan for that. So this is just another scan. Everything you're seeing here is from our own library. And then our major sponsor, of course, is Pfizer, and they supply us with the caffeine that we need to stay awake mostly 3 or 4 days in a row, because running a museum and then having a full-time job and having 3 lovely children as a single dad involves some degree of stimulants. Lastly, social media is important for a computer museum, but remember that likes does not equal visits to the museum. Social media is great for announcements, and that your social media should be on topic. In other words, I have Kennett Classics Facebook page, which is different than my personal, and then on my Twitter feed, which is at Bill Deg. I try to stay on the topic that's described and try not to get too political and mostly be about computers. But as YouTubers, and if there's any that are watching this right now, will attest, you can either be a YouTuber, or you could be a repair guy, or you could run a museum, or you can run a club. It's very difficult to do all of those things. So one of the important things that I learned in the last big point and tip I like to give to anyone who's interested in the museum is to remember that you have to stay focused, stay narrow on it. And if you don't have enough for a museum, find a local business that would be willing to display your business computers. That, like, maybe it's an accounting firm that has a glass case and they'd be willing to put some of your interesting accounting computers in there. Or maybe there's like University of Delaware. I worked with them to fill up Smith Hall with a TRS-80 Model 1 exhibit before, and perfected that for a year or two before moving it into the museum. So you don't have to run an entire museum. You can just do vintage computer festivals, and you can do local groups and local clubs, and have traveling exhibits. So you can also collaborate with maybe 5 or 10 other people who have enough stuff to put it all together and put it all in one place. But it's the most important thing to remember is that you have to do what works for you, and you have to remember to be willing to follow the feedback of other people. So that is it. And if anyone has any questions, I would love to hear them.
Go ahead.
I'm curious if the gift shop is enough to sustain the cost of the lease of the retail space, or if there's fundraisers that are done.
The gift shop is absolutely not. It makes barely anything.
And what type of fundraisers would you do?
Well, we've just earned nonprofit status, so we're going to start, and that's a to be started things for 2023, starting in December. So right now it's privately funded. The plan is get it done, make it live, show that it works, and then people will see it's a credible service providing entity that is worthy of grants and fundraising. That's the best I can tell you. The gift shop itself supports maybe utilities, something like that, and the money is turned around and used for maybe if we have an event or something like that, we'll use the money that we get from the event to pay for the food for the event. So it's not necessarily a money-making venture, and so there's a certain degree of luxury associated with running a museum, which again is why I would say it might not be for everybody, and you might be better off putting together good quality exhibits and then getting a local business to allow you to present them, or a library or a community center or so on.
Thank you. What entrance fees are there?
There's no entrance fee.
Including you have some kind of yearly thing?
Not at this time. I mean, obviously, now that we have the nonprofit status, the 501c, we're going to start working on that because you can't keep doing this forever. But we've been fortunate to be able to have a space and to be able to find a way to make it work. And you can't have an entrance fee to a gift shop.
So how did you, before the 501c3, make money and support the space if you didn't have any money coming in?
Just from private money.
I don't quite. I don't quite.
It's expensive, it's hard to, can't do it forever. Yeah, question.
Actually, I'm just gonna ask if the card is available online.
Pardon me?
If the card is available online for purchase.
The greeting card.
The greeting card, because I definitely.
Oh, they're only for sale in the museum itself, but if you're interested, you send a contact message through kennettclassic.com, which is our website. And you can contact us through there, and the only things that you can purchase through the website are the items that are for sale on eBay.
Oh, okay.
So I should say eBay sales, again, I don't want to make the museum look like it's a money-making venture, or the purpose of it is there, but I do have a few, maybe one or two computer cards and things like that for sale a month, that just are duplicates that aren't needed. But understand the computers that come in, they're almost, I'd say 70% of what you see in the museum are donations. We also have a donation jar, and people do put money in the donation jar. So I guess it adds up. We also do movies, television, magazines, and so on. That's not a huge money maker, but from time to time, people would like to rent a computer or for a legal case or whatever. I've been involved in a lot of different projects associated with that. People come in and they want to do archiving, computer disks. That's a service that we charge for. Computer repair from time to time. People come in and try to get computers repaired. Nothing can be repaired that's newer than 1990, but if you bring something in from 1990 or older, that can be repaired here at an hourly rate, just like it was a computer repair shop.
So we have a question from Discord. Is the library open access to visitors? Can you visit and enjoy browsing books in a comfortable location?
Yes, we have a library specifically set up for that. We're almost done with making it so that you can just kind of walk in and look at everything. We were lucky to get donations of bookcases, and we need to install the dividers because magazines need dividers to kind of hold like a year up at a time. So right now, if you pull out May of 1967 of Popular Electronics, you're going to be pulling all the rest of the magazines out with it. So we need to make it so that it's something you can more conveniently work with. And I think what we're going to do is we're probably going to have a membership program where if you are a member, you pay some sort of a yearly fee to have access to the library, to differentiate between people who just want to borrow things. So we're not completely, able to give all these services for free, but at the moment, if you come in and you want to have access to something, I'm more than happy to, or whoever happens to be here, happy to help you out. But we do pay for scanning. If somebody wants scanning of like a UNIVAC document or something like that. Any other questions?
Any copyright issues with the Commodore logo?
We actually that Commodore logo, it's in my opinion, it's so barely used. We don't sell them on the internet or anything. It's you come in and you buy it from the gift shop only. But the poster, I don't know if you're familiar with the Commodore poster that we've been selling since 2006. We sold about 1,000 of those. That has no Commodore logo on it. But the owner of Commodore itself, the Commodore logo and the rights to Commodore, we have an agreement with them.
Oh, okay, cool.
But that owner sold it again, so I don't know where it stands legally anymore, honestly. And honestly, I don't really care. I don't know who's watching this or who will be watching this. They're welcome to come here and what are they going to do? Take the hot sauces? I mean, I have the attitude of do something and ask for permission or say you're sorry later, but we do have documentation that says we're allowed to use the logo and for specific purposes in specific cases. Because just like with a nonprofit, you want to follow all the rules, you want to record all the money that you make, you want to do all those things so that you don't have to worry about it. And I believe that.
Okay. No question?
So when it's a weekday, and you don't have too many visitors, what do you do with your time there?
We have visitors every day because this is a retail location. So there's people walking around all the time. especially at Christmas. There's certain times of the year where there's more people than others, but pretty much people come in pretty regularly. So it's not there's I can't think of a day that goes by where people aren't coming here. And that was part of the plan. Put it in a place where people are going to go, that go with the flow of their life and their activities. Because I feel like if you have a museum that's off the beaten track, you're going to get a more targeted audience. You're going to get people who are more specifically interested in your theme of computer history or art or springs or radios or whatever it is that you have at your museum. But the idea behind this museum and the reason that our mugs say hello world on them and so on, and the whole theme of the place is that we're introducing computing history to people who basically didn't even know it was a thing.
I have a question about one of the slides you had, the punch card controller.
Yeah.
Does that have a Nixie tooth on the display? It kind of look like it.
The punch card is in the display. Yeah.
Well, it does have Nixie tooth, but
Yes, it does.
Nice
And
try.
people say that Nixie tubes. The other thing that's funny is we have an audio tour, and so people play the audio tour and they're walking around, and I can hear my voice as I'm walking around when I'm in the office. It's kind of funny, but yeah, Nixie tubes.
Any more questions? Okay, well, thank you very much. That was fun. I gotta get
Okay.
down.
And again, if you have any further questions or you're interested in getting a museum together, kennettclassic.com is the best way to reach me, because that's got the phone number, that's got directions, that's got, contact me electronically and so on. You can send your message to me or Karen or Eric or anybody else that's available. I'll be happy to help you. I'll give you a tour, and we look forward to seeing you. Thanks.